Good morning, good day, and good evening. Welcome to episode 126 of Tech for Tea. I am, as always, Brody Robertson, and today we have former maintainer, not really sure what's happening going on into the future, of something that you might want to call a distro, but it's not really a distro. The maintainer of the project, formerly known as Arch Linux GUI. How are you doing?
Hi, Brody. So, yeah, I'm really doing well. uh, Arch Linux GUI is discontinued, and it's now called Arch Linux GUI to settle the trademark thing. But yeah, I'm doing great. What about you?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I guess we'd probably get straight into the whole what's going on with that project, because I know a lot of people who are I had some people in my comment section the other day who are still talking about, hey, this seems like a great project to use, and had no idea that anything had actually happened to Arch Linux GUI. So why don't you just start by explaining sort of what's happened and why you made the decision you made?
Yeah, so when the project started growing, a lot of it came under the radar of a lot of people that were closer to the Arch team.
Mhm.
So there has been a lot of effort in the past to make a GUI installer for Arch Linux. And obviously that has never been put into practice because there's a common resentment within the, I don't know if I should put it like that, but there is a resentment in the Arch Linux, the core team somewhere, that a GUI installer shouldn't exist. If you look at the FAQs,
Mhm.
it's a debatable topic. Some
Yep.
people are for it and some are not. So it's, I would say, a 50-50 thing. But basically, when I started the project, my main goal was to solve three problems with the main Arch installer. So first is obviously the text user interface.
Yep.
Maybe that can be ignored if we talk about how good the wiki is.
Sure.
But when you talk about things because the installation process is a lot online, you need to get connected to some kind of internet and then
Mm.
download packages. So it works for a lot of countries that really have good internet connection. But where I have personally experienced this when before Reflector was a thing,
Mm.
um, downloading packages sucked really. You would have kilobytes, and before Pac-Man 6 came out, this was really a big problem. So each and you didn't have parallel downloads, right? So
Yeah.
each
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
every package took a lot of time to download.
Mhm.
So what if we had a option to install Arch Linux with all the packages frozen in time,
Mhm.
so that we could get the entire operating system running without an internet connection? So that was one of the main uses, apart from having just a GUI installer.
Yep.
And then the other thing is that whenever you install Arch Linux on a computer, you usually need a second device. You you're watching the wiki, or you're watching
Sure.
a
Yeah.
YouTube
Okay. Right.
video or a wiki. You need a laptop or a mobile phone, something
Mm.
like that. So when you have a GUI installer, you have basically endless possibilities. You could use something like Calamares,
Mhm.
or you could just use the wiki.
Yep.
And I basically recently did a video on how you can do that.
Mhm.
So that was the main goal of the project. Now, like I said, there is a resentment whether a GUI should exist or not exist. And then the whole thing that transpired to be is that someone or somebody just told the Arch Linux team, hey, a project exists like this,
Mhm.
and yada yada yada. So the Arch Linux team basically says this: you can't have something known as Arch Linux something.
Mhm. Sure.
There are projects like Arch Linux ARM and Arch Linux 32. They are official projects because the Arch Linux team says, yeah, this is the official Arch Linux
Yep.
sister project. That can't. So my project was basically violating that. So Arch Linux GUI kind of makes you think that this project is affiliated to Arch Linux.
Mm.
So that was one of their problems that they pointed out. And secondly, they said that anything that uses vanilla Arch Linux in the description or whatever on the website,
Mhm.
you can't have vanilla Arch, because vanilla Arch Linux is basically Arch Linux installed via the command line installer with everything that's official. So not
Mhm.
even the AUR. So I had a chat with Levente, who is the I think I'm pronouncing it wrong, but yeah, he's the lead developer of Arch Linux.
Okay.
And
Yep.
he told me that even an AUR helper like Paru or Ye,
Hmm.
if that's there on the system, it's not vanilla Arch.
Right.
So
I can understand that coming from their perspective where they want to make sure the AUR is this sort of like weird separate thing. They know that everybody on Arch uses it and most people use an AUR helper, but they still want to like keep their like that weird separation there. I don't understand why. I understand like the internal logic that gets them to that position though.
yeah, well, I think it's more to do with infrastructure because
Mhm.
Arch Linux, as far as I know, they do not operate on a donation. They don't have any kind of like money making thing, right? As far
Yeah, I
as I
think they
know,
just accept donations. I'm not
yeah.
sure if they have anything else actually.
So I think they try to minimize a lot of things and weed out a lot of extra things that will,
Mhm.
in the future, kind of impact on their infrastructure. So
I was mistaken. They do have a couple of sponsors, but they're like the sort of sponsors that like a YouTuber would have, like shells and things like that. Nothing
yeah,
like
but
nothing
it's
like
not like
Ubuntu has, for example.
yeah, exactly. So I think that they are pretty. They have a lot of constraints on their infrastructure. For
Yep.
example, a lot of packages that exist on the AUR exist there because simply because if you were to put them on the official repositories, they're going to take up a lot of space.
Hmm.
So I think it makes sense from an infra point of view. But when you want to talk when you have a product that is related to you in some way, which the
Hmm.
AUR is, trying to distance yourself from it is kind of sketchy, I believe.
Hmm.
And you're going to expect users to be using. I mean, you have articles on that on the AUR on the wiki, right?
Yep. Yep.
If you would want to distance yourself from it, you wouldn't have it in the first place. So
No, I understand that. I don't. What does the actual description say right now? It's something like it's not officially endorsed by Arch or something like that. Give me 1 second. AUR Arch Wiki. It says AUR packages are user reuse contents. These package builds are completely unofficial and have not been thoroughly vetted. Any use of the provided files is at your own risk. That's a fair warning there. There used to be a different one here. Maybe it was on one of the other pages, but I do remember there being one specifically saying where they don't recommend using the AUR.
yeah, and that's kind of weird because if
Mm.
you have all the packages, for example, if you look at Debian and APT,
Mm.
most of the packages are there in their repositories, and anything like what Ubuntu does, what Ubuntu's AUR you can say is that PPA
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
It's called
Fedora has the
yeah,
same thing with Copper.
yeah. So every project I believe has some kind of constraint because free, and when we talk about free and open source, it's free not in the sense of money but freedom, right?
Sure, sure.
So money is always something that, because whenever you're running something on servers, it's going to cost money.
Mm.
So there's always going to be constraints on the infra, and that's the reason why I used chaotic in some of my packages, because
Yep.
I faced that constraint myself as well.
Mm.
So that's pretty understandable. But then when you, like, for example, I have this repository called ALG repo.
Mm.
If I tell people just stop using ALG repo, you should not use it, or let's say Garuda Linux comes and say you should not use chaotic,
Yep, yep.
it kind of sounds weird because it's your stuff and then you're telling people not to use it. So that's the position I have with AUR. That's the kind of opinion I have with AUR. That
I
uh,
I can
yeah,
see. Okay, I think there's a sort of two sides to this. I can understand having a warning there about the fact that it contains community-driven content because
yeah,
they have moderators there that will get rid of things that are blatant malware, but it's not like they're constantly combing the AUR to make sure it's always going to be safe. So making sure people actually understand what they're actually getting into when they go and use it, but yeah, I don't see. I personally use the AUR for a lot of things. I don't really see any reason to discourage its use. Just make sure people know what they're actually getting into before they start using it.
exactly.
Anyway,
So
before we go like way too far down a tangent, I think the idea of a Arch, maybe not an Arch GUI, but an Arch installer that's not just like the manual installation process, is slowly starting to change. because what was it, like a year ago? Was it a year ago? Maybe a bit less than that. I don't know. Time, I've lost all track of time in the past couple of years. Arch brought in Arch Install, the script to sort of automate the installation process, which
Yes,
obviously isn't a GUI installation, but it is a step towards a much simpler installation.
yes.
I don't think there's ever going to be a point where the main Arch project fully endorses having a GUI. I don't
I
think that
think
fits
it's
with the goals.
in the no. I think it's in the works because like someone, if you look at the Arch ISO's issues, I talked about this recently. Someone has suggested a GUI, like not in GUI installer as in Calamares, but having a graphical user interface like Plasma, and then you
Okay.
have a browser like Firefox, because the official installer has Lynx, which is a TUI installer. But
Right.
you have when you are on the TTY, you have to navigate, press Alt and your arrow keys back and forth between the window you're installing on and then the one that has Lynx up and running. And like, to be honest, Lynx is not, and not just Lynx, any TUI web browser is not the prettiest, right? It's not. It's just going to render HTML.
It's functional for the Arch wiki, but the other problem is you don't have something like Tmux, so you have to jump back and forth. You can do it on one device.
Yeah. So if you have like just Plasma running, let's just ignore Calamares for the moment.
Sure,
if you have something like Plasma, and then you have a terminal window, and then you have a browser like Firefox, you could just spawn these two on one screen, and then one, it allows copy pasting of commands. Let's say you want to discourage that as well. It's fine. You can type the commands out, but you have everything on one screen.
So what you're saying is like bootstrapping it from a graphical environment rather than the TUI environment.
Yeah, so
Right,
that is something that is suggested on the Arch ISO's issues right now. And the really positive thing about it is that David, who is the maintainer of Arch ISO, he hasn't said no to it, right? So I think this is a very positive thing to consider. I believe that like in a couple of maybe months, we could have potentially a separate profile, which because it makes sense to keep the TUI interface, the TTY.
Yeah.
It should be there, right? Because that's what Arch Linux is, and that's how it all started.
Well, it wouldn't be out of the ordinary to add an extra mode into the installer, because a while back they added in the what was it? They added in features from, I can't remember what the project was called, but it was a installer for visual impairment. The project, that original project is dead now.
It's called Braille TTY.
Yeah. They had like a separate mode for that, and I think it had a screen reader and a couple other things built into that mode as well.
Yes, you could boot up with either just the TTY and then one with the screen reader. Yes. Yeah. So what has been suggested on the issue is that basically you have the main profile, which is the TTY, which is for the TTY installer, and then you have a separate profile which is with some kind of GUI. So now the thing is, we have a lot of options on Linux. You have someone likes Plasma, someone likes GNOME. My idea is basically just get something that's running on X or Wayland. It doesn't have to be something really fancy. You just need to spawn a terminal window and should be able to spawn some kind of some kind of web browser, and you're good to go. So a separate profile makes sense. So one of the things that I kind of propose to Levante is that if part of Arch Linux GUI could be made official, so that's the whole conversation was about. Like, I have a lot of stuff from the AUR which shouldn't be there, and then this is not vanilla Arch Linux and this and that. So if I have to make the project, if I have to try to make the project official, then I have to make certain changes, which obviously requires removing all of the theme settings, customizations, everything.
Yeah.
And then removing all of the AUR packages, including the AUR helper. That's also not allowed. And then obviously removing Calamares.
Right.
So that's one way I could make ALG into an official project. But the only caveat here is that I would have to convince everybody in the team to convince them that my method of doing this is what should be adopted. And yeah, so the reason I decided to discontinue is because I know that since so many years, this has been a 50-50 opinion whether a GUI installer should exist or not exist. I know that someone in the team would veto this out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all the legwork that I would do to, even like try to make this official, I don't think it would like be worth the effort uh, it would require to, just do it, because at the end someone says that no, this idea just doesn't fit in the philosophy, because when we're talking about Arch, we have to talk a lot about philosophy, right? So it doesn't fit this philosophy or that philosophy, then
Right.
all the work is waste, basically.
That makes sense. I would love to see like an official like Arch. I don't know how like. I understand not wanting to use Calamaris because that brings it a bit too close to things like Manjaro, and maybe they don't want to have a fully automated graphical installation, but at least having that graphical environment. I don't think Wayland, just because of the NVIDIA problem, but
Yeah, absolutely.
you would have to do it in Xorg, which that's fine. It wouldn't be out of the ordinary for the Arch installer to ship extra things that don't get shipped with vanilla Arch. For example, it uses ZSH, so also shipping extra things, it's not that weird. They'll just get they won't end up being a part of the thing you install at the end anyway.
Exactly.
I
And
think
if you want
sorry.
to, if you want to worry about infra at the end, what you can do is keep the official Arch installer, which is the TTY, obviously, to get it from whatever mirrors you have right now. And the rest of the ISOs, let's say you want to offer GNOME, Plasma, and XFCE, or maybe just one, you can probably provide it via SourceForge, OSDN, or you don't even have to like spend extra for infra. Like all of these things can be taken care of like pretty easily. So like infra isn't an issue. I think it's more of the philosophical thing that exists with the
There's the whole idea of keep it simple, stupid, and things like that, where I think if it was going to become an official project, you'd need to have support within the team before you took it on, just in case, someone did come along and say, this isn't going to work. If you already have that initial support from at least some members, then that gives you a bit of extra, I guess, leeway to push that forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you happen to have those, the links to those issues or know what the issues were called, can you just send those to me afterward? I would actually love to look at those.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, by the way, Arch ISO 170, but I'll send you the links, no problem.
Yeah, no problem. Awesome. So you've spoken a bit about the about Arch Linux GUI. So temporarily, and I guess for now, the name's going to be Arch Linux GUI, even though you've discontinued it. Just let people know why you went with the name Arch Linux GUI.
So Arca, I was basically looking to keep the ALG acronym, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, they don't just keep saying Arch Linux GUI, they call it ALG.
Yeah.
So I want to keep that acronym, and Arco Linux is already taken. So I was trying to find a derivative term that means Arch in another language. So I did a bit of research, and Arca is basically Arch in, I think, Ukrainian or like Eastern European languages. Lithuanian or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. So it's Arch in another language, and then I can keep the ALG acronym. So that's why I chose that name.
So what are you thinking of doing with the project? Is it just dead forever? Are you thinking of bringing it back at some point, or adjusting into something else? Like, what exactly is your plan for now? Or are you just not really sure just yet?
No, I do have a plan actually. I don't know if I can say this at the moment, but I've got like some of the developers of the other distributions. They asked me if I wanted to join their project.
Okay.
So I'll talk about that if I do. I just told them that I want a break right now.
No, you don't have to give me any specifics on like which projects, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just because nothing. I haven't joined any project, so if I just take their name and then it doesn't materialize,
Yeah, of course.
It doesn't make sense, right? So if I do join them, then I would obviously reveal it on my channel, and I'll tell you obviously.
Yeah.
But as far as ALG is concerned, for the foreseeable future, I think it's gone because unless and until there is some kind of effort to make it official. There's no point in continuing, given the kind of like I mean, the community is great. The community I built around ALG is great, and when I announced that the project is like being discontinued, at least like I don't know if it's forever, but yeah, for a foreseeable future, it's gone. So a lot of people were like, yeah, I mean, we use this, and some of us are daily driving with it, and it's sad. But then you've got to respect the parent project's policies and whatever philosophy they have. So there's no point in really grinding out again. And I think as far as what I wanted to achieve with ALG and the message that it gave like to the general Arch community is that a GUI installer is feasible, and out of all the by the way I use Arch and all of those meme things, the whole point of having the GUI installer at the end is time.
Yeah.
Installing Arch Linux takes time, and if you want to do it again and again, because given the rolling release nature, something's going to break, and there will be a time when you have to reinstall it in some way or the other, or maybe you have multiple machines. So GUI installer does that quickly, and this is like one of the most common messages I received when the project was discontinued, is that wow, like we had this means of installing Arch Linux, which was really not only simple but efficient in like time point of view. So yeah, that's what I've decided about ALG right now.
Yeah, I've been very big on the pushing forward for installers of Arch. Like, I get the whole, hey, you got to install Arch manually, you learn whatever you learn. I think the whole you learn a bunch from going through the install process is kind of nonsense. Like, if you dig down into each individual step, sure, you can start to understand a bit more about your system, but once you've done that once, there's not really much you get from doing that again. So
absolutely,
I don't think it's just necessarily with the GUI install. I do like having a GUI installer as an option, because there are people out there who prefer to have a GUI, but I've been pushing just generally forward with having some sort of installer. Like, there's no reason to just have a manual installation. The only other thing, like the only other distro that has only a manual installation that comes to the top of my head, actually, sorry, there's two. Bedrock, because the whole point of that is doing your own thing, and Gentoo. And Gentoo, Gentoo is Gentoo. Gentoo will do whatever Gentoo does.
Yeah.
But for anything else, I think having the option of a automated installation process, whether that is a TUI or a GUI, is a good thing, because most people, the actual install is pretty much the same. Like, you're going to set up your FS tab file, you're going to set up your file system, it's going to be one of the standard file systems, you're going to have your partitions, you're going to have, the standard stuff you would do to have your system functioning. The thing that differs is the post-install. I'm not a big fan of... I know that ALG did have some of this, but I'm generally not a big fan of any post-install stuff in the installers, because that's usually a bit more of a personal preference thing.
Yeah, I mean, people are free to have their opinions. So some people, like, that's why I had these pure and themed editions. So people want just the like vanilla Arch plus okay, when you say vanilla, but just people want Arch plus some kind of stock DE. You can use the pure editions, and if you want all of the NVIDIA stuff configured, and you want the browser installed and theming and stuff like that, basic stuff, you can use that. So you have, I think Linux is all about options, right? You shouldn't be like just stuck to, no, I should only install via this method, I should only have these repositories and only these packages. The whole point of Linux and the options we have here is that I can have a system I can have an operating system on my computer whichever way I want it, and I can choose whatever packages I want, as long as I obviously trust the developer, but I can choose whatever I want on my system. And that's also one of the like core philosophical points of Arch. You build your system according to yourself. But the kind of thing that people argue about, you learn about Linux in general, I believe that's not true to a great extent as far as Arch is concerned. Because if you look at the installation process, it's what Packstrap is. You partition, you generate fstab and all of stuff. You
pretty much
get Packstrap to create your root file system, and then you install the bootloader microcode and stuff like that. And then you create your host name and stuff. But that's not really learning a whole lot about Linux. Anyone who has used Linux in the past, whether it's Manjaro, Ubuntu, they would know this stuff pretty much, like in some way or the other. The package manager might be different, or maybe the default file system might be different, but in some way or the other, it's kind of same because it's all Linux, right? If you really like want to learn about how your system or how your operating system works, I think Gentoo and its installation is the way to go if you want to like learn about how everything is being made, how everything is compiled. Because as far as repositories in Arch are concerned, we have packages. We are still in Arch talking about packages.
Sure.
When we come to Gentoo, we are not talking about packages anymore because then we are locally compiling everything on our machine. So I really, and this is my personal opinion, that I disagree with people who say that if you don't install Arch the wiki way, you're not going to learn about your computer. Because at the end, for example, if you have Arch install the script, that's doing the same kind of thing a GUI installer would do for you as well. So it doesn't matter if you have if you want to keep the installation the wiki way, it doesn't matter whether you are doing it on a TTY or a GUI like Plasma. Because as long as you have stuff like Arch install or any kind of automated script, it's basically going to leave you as clueless as a GUI installer would. Right?
Well, even just going through the wiki and just running the commands blindly is gonna, like, you won't learn anything from that.
Yeah, exactly.
One thing I would disagree with you there is with Gentoo. I've gone through the Gentoo installation process. It's not that different from Arch. Like, it can be if you want to go through that process of, like, compiling the kernel yourself and customizing all of the compile options, things like that. You can absolutely go and do so. But if you want to take the easier path, you can basically do an Arch-style installation on Gentoo with no problem whatsoever. The one thing Gentoo does have much better, though, is the documentation for the installation is just miles ahead of Arch. Like, everything has, like, 2 or 3 paragraphs explaining what every little thing does. Arch, it's like, hey, do this, it sets your time. Do this, it sets your keyboard. Do this, it sets your file system. That's basically it.
Exactly.
If you really want to learn about how Linux works and how it's all pieced together, honestly, the best way to do that is just sit down. This isn't what you would do for a daily drive system, but sit down and go through Linux from scratch. It will take you a long time. But if you really want to learn about Linux, that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that will also, like, most of the, like, for example, Arch, Gentoo, you get a package manager out of the box. When you start from LFS, you don't even have a package manager to start from. So everything that you want on your system, you're compiling it manually and installing it manually. And like a very good example of this is KOS, if you know that, KOS, whatever it's called. They're also, I think, an LFS system, but then they use Pacman as a package manager.
Right.
So if you really like want to learn all the hardcore internals from the scratch, LFS is the way to go.
You did mention, like, I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, if it was just on the Discord, that you sort of felt like burnt out from the project. How much work were you actually putting into Arch Linux GUI, and sort of what really went into maintaining it?
So, well, I started the project in the pandemic. It was, I think, December of 2020. So
wow, I thought the project had been around longer than that.
Yeah, like the planning and everything was because the whole purpose actually to begin with was to make an ISO that would run on RISC-V.
Right.
There was this project that I was working on separately, and I had to get an operating system. So I tried to get Garuda, but obviously like that wasn't feasible. So I reached out to the Garuda leader, Srinivas, who happens to be a friend, and asked him like, how do I get into building my own slimmed down ISO? And he was the one who pointed me to Arch ISO, and then obviously got a lot of help from Eric from Arch Linux.
Yep.
So when I had the project, it was running well on RISC-V, but then I just got bored out of that project, and then I really enjoyed building ALG. So because it was the pandemic, I initially could spend a lot of time. Like if I have to give a number, it would be like 12 hours a day because yeah, because I was still figuring things out. I was reading a lot of documentation, and
Okay.
I was obviously not the best programmer out there right there. So I had to learn a lot of like I was learning shell scripting, for example. So things like that, like reading documentation and figuring stuff out, that took a lot of time. But once I had Calamaris set up as I wanted it and it worked on x86 the way I wanted it, I got it registered, I think in January on SourceForge, and then people started like using it and reviewing it, and then it started to grow gradually. But so that point of time it was chill because nobody knew the project existed, and people who knew it, it was a small number. I had like 10-15 downloads a day, and it doesn't really matter. So now what happens is Armano from EF Linux Made Simple, he covers the project, and suddenly I have this boom, and so many people start coming in. And when any project like expands or it scales, you get new issues and new stuff coming in, and then new requests. So with that, the kind of pressure started increasing, and I was like, I don't know, lucky or unlucky, I'd say lucky, that Armano covered the project very early on, like I think in April. So that was when the entire thing like really took off, and then other YouTube channels, including yours, covered it. So I started getting a lot of requests about, hey, you have Plasma right now. Why don't you get GNOME? Why don't you provide XFCE?
Okay.
So now I have to like read the documentation of GNOME and the documentation of XFCE and i3, and a lot of these things, like maybe GNOME and XFCE I've used before. I've used Plasma before, like, but I get like BSPWM, and that's something I've never used before. So I have to like read the entire documentation, see how SXHKD, that's how it's configured, how the BSPWM files are. So that really took like a lot of times it was all-nighters, so I used to sit all night, and it would be like 15-16 hours daily.
Wow.
So it was, and this happened continuously for a year until like the pandemic eased off and lockdown was over. So like we finally had to get out of our homes, go to college, go to work, and stuff like that. So then obviously I had to I couldn't spend much time, but by the time this happened, the project was already like I had 12 editions and everything was stable. So now it wasn't about coding anything new or like building anything new. It was all about maintaining it. So I could just maintain with the given source code I have. I just had to maintain. So if anything changes, recompile it, and anything new is there included or excluded. So that was like I think from March 2022. That was pretty chill. But yeah, before that, when the entire thing was being developed, when the requests came in, and then I got a lot of like obscure hardware, like, hey, your project's not working on my hardware, and then I have this archaic Intel CPU and stuff like that. So that really took a lot of time. So the 15-16 hours that went daily into it were because of that. Reading documentation, figuring out people's requests on like support their hardware, which I don't have, obviously. And I think that's the reason why the project grew, because I tried to help like each and every person out there, and I was doing all of this alone. So by the time like I reach here, and then I have this trademark thing on the project, I really feel that I hadn't like, and I haven't been like, for example, on a holiday since like 2019, before the pandemic. So yeah, I just felt that it's a lot of time and energy and effort put into the project, and I also like put my YouTube resources, like my ad revenue, to get hardware, stuff like that. So I think it's like at this point in time, it's pretty much good to say goodbye to the project, because I want to like explore new things as well. And yeah, the project served its purpose, what it was supposed to do. And then, like I said earlier, there is a notion about a graphical install in the community now, that people will now talk about this more, whether Arch should have a GUI or not have a GUI. Something which wasn't like too much talked about in the past.
So what you're saying is the YouTubers are at fault.
What?
The YouTubers are at fault for giving you too much work.
No.
I think what people sort of misunderstand with a lot of projects, especially when a project is doing something really well and people are giving it a lot of positive coverage, is a lot of projects, not just distro projects, but software projects, like just general software projects as well, a lot of them are maintained by a single person.
Yeah.
And when you have, I guess when you have that spike in users, it is going to massively inflate the amount of work you need to do.
Yes.
Especially with the distro. Oh, like, I keep calling it a distro. It's not really, like, I don't know. How would you classify Arch Linux GUI? Just as an installer for Arch? As a distro? What would you say?
I mean, I'm open to opinions. I call it an installer, but many people call it a distro, so they're free to call it whatever they want.
I think with whatever we're going to call it, when you have some sort of installer like this, people expect whatever it is that they use is going to be available. Whether it's, one of the main things like KDE GNOME, which generally you'd expect to be there. But then you start getting into like more obscure stuff like BSPWM, and you can go down the window manager rabbit hole for an entire year and still not run enough stuff to like go and include in there. And that's without even getting to the stuff that like a few people use.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as window managers are concerned specifically, I got like so many requests. Some of them, some window managers I even hadn't heard of, right?
Yeah.
So I had to like search the Arch wiki, what is this, and then search YouTube, what is this. But then I had thought about, for example, I got a lot of requests for DWM, awesome. But then I had to draw a line somewhere because, like this, the number of editions would just exponentially increase. So then I just decided, as far as window managers are concerned, i3 and BSPWM would be it. And then I had to like tell people that, hey, I mean, I love your enthusiasm, but for me, one person, it's not really feasible to maintain so many. And like you said, it's just some people who are going to be using it as compared to Plasma or GNOME, where thousands of people are using it. So like at one point in time, I had to draw a line, obviously.
Yeah.
So it also came with DEs, like for example, DPIN and what is that? This Budgie. People were like requesting. In fact, I also phased out Mate just for the sake, because like a lot of the amount of people who are using Mate was really less as compared to GNOME. So it was just a sentimental kind of thing. Those who are just used to Mate, they are using it. But yeah, I had to draw a line there as well.
Yeah, I think that's one line that's easy enough to draw. When it comes to the hardware issues, that I don't even know how you would go about approaching that. Especially when, because there is this, like, Linux has this wide array of supported hardware. I think, I want to say, if the oldest thing the current kernel supports is the Intel 486SX. So everything from there up until now is supported by the Linux kernel. And there's a lot of things in that range, and there's a lot of things that could definitely break. And for a single person, I don't even know where you begin trying to look at that.
Yeah, and then we also have to look about graphics, right? So, for example, NVIDIA drivers. So that was another big, like, I wouldn't say a headache. Like initially, it was a lot of work because I wasn't like really abreast with all the NVIDIA nomenclature and how they named their products. So it took me quite a time, like a week, to understand like how. And then I like someone I know works in NVIDIA, so I just got in touch with them just to understand what are the different types of cards on desktop, what are cards on laptop, and stuff like that. Because like, for example, recently someone said they had a 3050 Ti, and I was like, what, this card exists? Because on desktop it doesn't, right? But then they told me, oh, it's on a laptop. So I was like, oh, okay.
When you're considering laptop, you also have like hybrid graphics to worry about as well, and that's a whole nother can of worms to open.
Yeah, that's another big thing that I had to worry about.
Well, hey, you got out early because give it a couple of months and you have another set of GPUs to worry about when Intel's
Absolutely.
desktop cards roll out. I guess the laptop cards are out right now.
Yeah, but as far as Intel is concerned, it's pretty easy.
Mm.
Everything's in the Mesa package, and anything that you need outside of Mesa is usually the older archaic stuff.
Mm.
So Intel is not really something that most of us distro developers or project maintainers we worry about. And I think the same has to be for AMD.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as whenever NVIDIA comes into the picture, then we have to, for example, when I introduced NVIDIA, the 700 series was supported, which is the Kepler architecture.
Yeah.
But soon it was phased out. So then anybody who has like a 710 or a 730 or even a 760, you suddenly lose all the support. And the funny thing is, anybody who has a 750 Ti, they have a support because their architecture is not Kepler. So it's like
Right.
all of those minute things that came into play, and that's like a lot of work that usually people don't see. That's behind the scenes.
Well, the main concern I was bringing up with Intel, I know they obviously have the integrated graphics, but whenever you launch a new product SKU, it's always going to have some sort of like early teething issues. Obviously, it's going to be using those Mesa drives which already existed, but there's going to be like specific issues that show up when those desktop cards drop. Like, it's probably not going to be as bad as like a whole new company doing it, but I guarantee there's going to be something wrong on day one.
Yes, there's going to be, but Intel is one of those companies that has like contributed to open source a lot.
Yeah.
And
It's
they make
not
sure
going to be
that,
as big of an issue as Nvidia doing it.
yeah, even if there is for even like not even day one, let's say a couple of months in the beginning, Intel is going to we know that Intel is going to find a fix in at least 6 months.
Yeah.
So that issue isn't really big. Even with AMD, I believe they are also like contributing back to the open source community. So even with their drivers, like recently when the 6000 series launched, it wasn't much of an issue because with people did have an issue. I believe someone on the Discord or Telegram group was saying they had a 6700X or something, and the AMD GPU driver just didn't work. And then all I told them is pretty much I can't do anything about this. I'm pretty sure AMD will release an update, and they did, which fixed the issue. So as far as Intel AMD are concerned, they do it like in a very short amount of time.
Yeah. What are you running on your personal system?
I'm running the ALG Plasma Edition at the moment.
No, I meant like hardware-wise. Sorry.
I have a 12600K,
Yeah.
which came out, and as far as GPUs, I have a 750 Ti. That's mainly for testing.
Right. Okay.
I'm using the 12600K's iGPU because I don't need anything. I don't do a lot of gaming.
That's a weirdly skewed system.
Yeah, that is. Actually, I was looking for something in the 30 series, like a 3060. That would be like more than enough because I also do YouTube videos, so that would help me in that. But the prices are really like not sane at the moment. Like even right now, the GPU prices have gone down really well, but it's still not in that MSRP kind of thing, at least in my country. So
yeah, it's about the same here. I was looking at buying a 6700 XT, and from what I've seen, it's like maybe $100 to $150 above MSRP, which is still, it's much better than it was because this time last year we were looking at like double the MSRP.
Yeah, and right now, for example, the 3060, if we are looking at the OC cards from maybe Gigabyte or Asus, they're selling at the price of 3070 at the moment, which is not a lot. But yeah, last year it was definitely double of what it is, like the double of the MSRP. So the situation has improved right now, but it's still not where we want it to be, like the post-COVID.
Well, part of the situation improving is Nvidia kind of they banked on the crypto boom like continuing longer. They had a I don't know if you heard about this, but they had a contract with TSMC where they said manufacture all of these chips. they
Mhm.
were trying to get out of the contract, and they were like, "No, you're gonna buy these GPUs whether you like them or not." So
Okay.
it's probably gonna continue with the pricing probably for at least another year, and hopefully that's enough time to get back to like somewhat reasonable supply chains. I would hope.
Yeah, actually, yeah, Nvidia is at blame, but what problem in my country is that the people who not the scalpers, the people
Mm.
who sell these cards, right?
Yep.
They bought it in excess to sell it to scalpers
Yep.
or to the miners. Now, what has happened is the demand, because crypto crash and all of that stuff happened, so the demand has gone down drastically.
Mm-hmm.
So they have these cards which they bought for this very high prices, and they just don't want to sell it for like the near MSRP price.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still holding the cards which they can sell, but they don't want to sell it at a loss because they bought it at like double the MSRP.
Mm-hmm.
So they're just so there's no shortage actually. The cards are in the country and they have it, but they don't want to sell it for a loss.
Yeah, I've noticed the same thing as well. Like, there's a couple of cards here and there out of stock, but as a general market overview, there are cards in stock. It doesn't really make any sense, the pricing that we're still seeing. It's better
Yeah.
than it was, but I would like it to be just a little bit lower.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing you mentioned on the Discord was thinking about like if you were gonna like continue on with the distro thing, you wouldn't want to go and turn Arch Linux GUI into its own like separate distro. If you wanted to do that, you would go and like actually make a whole new project to do that goal. So have you still been thinking about that, or has that sort of been replaced by potentially joining one of these existing distros?
It would be joining one of the existing distros, and the
Mm.
reason for that is basically we don't need more and more distributions
Mm-hmm.
out there. There are a lot, like plenty of them, right?
Yeah.
So contributing to the ones that are well established is the way forward, and I believe Linux doesn't need more distros.
Mm-hmm.
Linux needs more applications
Yeah.
and application supports, and we also need some kind of standardization because like there's so much option. Earlier, like for example, on Windows, we used to make fun that hey, you don't have a package manager, right? You have to go to your respective vendor sites to download apps.
Mm.
But now Windows has the Windows Store, which is not the best. Obviously, it sucks, but yeah, you
Yeah.
have now everything in one place. So that they're trying to do something like Linux. Now,
Mm.
Linux is not perfect either. We have to standardize things because if there are a ton of options available, there's no way that you can make Linux mainstream anyway. Because
Mm-hmm.
someone or there are going to be factions, right? Someone's going to like APT, and someone's going to like Pac-Man, and someone's going to like DNF, and there's always going to be this wars like we have with Systemd and OpenRC, for
Well,
example.
you also then bringing things like Flatpak and Snaps as well to that.
Yeah. So there has to be some kind of standardization that we
Mm-hmm.
need to be doing in order to so if you introduce more of these things, more distributions and more package manager and more just desktop environments and everything, more options, you're just adding to the chaos rather than trying to subsidize the chaos or
Mm-hmm.
bring the chaos to calm. So I can make a new distribution, and probably people who used ALG could probably migrate to it, but I don't see a point in doing that because there are really well established distributions that are doing great. So EndeavourOS, for example, they're doing great. So if I get a chance to get there, I would consider that as a better alternative to starting out a new project from scratch.
Yeah, I think with ALG itself, that while, adding in extra distros for the sake of it doesn't really make much sense, but ALG did something different. I think that's why people treat it a little bit differently. It's not like, hey, here's just another distro that's doing like all of the different like Ubuntu is a really great example of this, where you have different distros of Ubuntu that are
Yeah.
just Ubuntu with a different desktop environment. There's no reason for those to really exist and not just be like, options in the Ubuntu installer.
Yep. Yep.
No,
But the thing about the Ubuntu based, like the Lubuntu and Xubuntu, whatever they are,
yeah.
the thing is they have really separate developers and separate websites.
No,
And
I get
separate,
that. But
yeah.
it just feels like, from a outside perspective, it just doesn't really make much sense. Why?
Yeah, absolutely. You could
The
have
only
like a net
difference really is
installer.
the environment.
Yeah. Yep.
But the problem with the problem with trying to work on standards is you need support from people, because if you don't have support, then you have the problem with you've probably seen the XKCD comic about standards, where you have 14 competing standards. Now we need to make a universal standard that covers everyone's use cases. Then the problem you have then is now there are 15 competing standards.
Yeah. So that's the reason why I believe because I think someone mentioned this on their channel that there was efforts to, for example, standardize the package management in Linux, and
I haven't heard about that.
out of all the and I think there was a committee set up by Red Hat to do this, and obviously Red Hat is going to choose DNF of all of the package managers. And when they said that we are going to be using DNF, everybody backed out immediately. So there was a huge response to standardizing the package management. Everyone was in for it. But the moment the committee said we are using DNF, everybody said, okay, goodbye. We're not using DNF. So I think one way to standardize anything in Linux or in the open source world is to, every project has a good thing. For example, the really biggest selling point of Arch, which Arch team or anybody says is the installation project process, I disagree completely. The biggest selling point of Arch Linux is Pacman. And Pacman is, I believe, the best package manager of all time. The way it handles dependencies, the way it just functions, Pacman is, like, I believe, my personal opinion, is better than apt, DNF, or even emerge, whatever that is. So if you want to standardize, let's say, a DE or a package manager, try to get the best one that handles every aspect, every use case. In like, you can't obviously satisfy everybody, but in like a 90% use case scenario, it satisfies like 90% of the people. And that could be standardized. And the others, obviously, they can exist together. So anybody, the rest 10% who don't want to use the standard, they are free to use whatever they want to use. But what happens when we standardize this is you can directly compete with Windows or platforms like Microsoft or Apple. And the only reason I think that on desktop we are not able to do this is because we have this greatly varying opinion. And I think ALG is a very good example of this, as to whether we should have a graphical installer for Arch or we should not have a graphical installer for Arch. We really have like a lot of opinions. If there would be like some kind of way to standardize any opinion that we have out there, or any component that we have out there, then we would really be on an advantage, because all of the proprietary companies, they are, if we are going to take out open source licenses out of the picture, they're going to collapse. And most of these companies, the reason why they spend so much money on open source each year is because in return they benefit from it a lot. Right? Yeah. So that's one way we as open source users or developers or the community in general, we can try to like get all of these things streamlined. And then obviously I think Richard Stallman will be really happy.
Well, I think that issue with like standardization goes back to what I was saying earlier with having the different options in your installer, where everybody is happy to agree that we need some sort of standard. We need something that everybody can agree on. But the issue is that everybody has their ego tied up in their specific option, and they want their option to be the one that everybody else is using. Whether that's with, the graphics card brand you buy. Yeah, I'm an AMD guy, I'm an NVIDIA guy. Whether that's with your package manager, I use Pacman, I use Emerge, I use this, I use that, or programming languages, or anything else. if
Yeah.
if you're gonna have something be the standard, everybody wants it to be their thing. But then if you make something new and try to get everyone to agree on that being the standard, now you just have more things that are getting in the way of there actually being a standard. It's this problem that is really difficult to solve unless everybody wants to solve it.
Exactly. And like, I believe not a lot of people are interested in that because
Mhm.
everyone's happy with what they are on.
Yeah, I think
So,
there's a lot of people that make a relatively compelling argument to say that it doesn't really matter if Linux gets any bigger. Like, and when you, as long as you have those people, there's always going to be that, I guess, barrier in the way to try to push that ahead.
yeah.
I don't know what the best idea is. I think there is definitely compelling arguments to both sides. I'm just sitting back here and sort of watching what's happening, and I'm just gonna talk about what's going on, basically.
Yeah, we all are going to be doing that.
Mm.
Actually, the thing is, a lot of open source developers that contribute to really important projects, for example, the kernel
Yeah.
or some kind of drivers, they are working in big MNCs.
Hmm.
So they might not get something by doing a commit to a certain project, but they get paid for doing it via the companies. For example, Google has their own open source
Yeah.
team or this department that pays all of the developers that develop the Google open source projects. Similarly, Facebook has it, and now even Microsoft has it, surprisingly.
Hmm.
So many people, they have two sides to the story. They want to contribute to open source, but the companies, the proprietary companies that they are working in,
Hmm.
that the salary pays their bills, right?
Right.
So they want to keep both the aspects going on. They want open source to thrive, and they also want to be able to pay their bills and survive, because like not everyone is Richard Stallman who gets sponsored, but you go to a country, give a talk, and you get sponsored stuff. So everyone has to run their families and run their pay their internet bills, pay their bills. So they kind
Oh.
of keep this proprietary software thing up and running, so that proprietary software remains, so that they are employed basically.
Yeah.
And as a side business, as a side activity or side project, they're free to contribute to open source. So that's the one reason why I believe that there's this barrier kind of thing, that people don't want to make Linux or any open source project for that matter to be really mainstream. People still want proprietary to thrive, because at the end of the day it runs people's houses. So I think that's one of the reason, probably.
I think that makes sense. I have to think about. No, I think that would make sense. I just have to think a bit about that.
Because I believe I was looking at all of the Linux kernel contributions in after 2010, and majority of these contributions, 99% of them, all of the individuals were working in some organization, and these are big organizations. So whether they are paid to do this or not, they have a salary that they are earning each month, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing about open source right now. A lot of the projects that really matter to the proprietary companies, they are the ones who are primarily directly or indirectly developing.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's something a lot of people who are hardcore free software don't really want to admit. Like, we can say Microsoft bad, Intel, oh, no, not Intel bad, Google bad, Facebook even, but all of these companies do have a vested interest in making the projects that they care about actually better, and one of those main projects they care about is going to be the Linux kernel.
Yes.
Anyway, you said you couldn't really do much past an hour. We're getting close to an hour now, so it's probably about time to end it off.
Yep.
Let people know where they can find you if they want to, I don't know, ask about future projects you're going to be involved in.
I'm really active on my YouTube channel, and I plan to do a lot of stuff there. So if I join another project, that's where I'll be telling people. I'm also available on Telegram, Discord.
What
So
is your YouTube channel? Just so people know.
Demonkiller,
Demonkiller.
DMK in caps. Yeah.
I'll bring that open right now. And on your Discord, you say?
Same Demonkiller.
Yep.
9375, I believe. That's the.
I'll leave your Discord server and your YouTube. Anything else? If there's anything else you want me to link, I'll put it in the description down below. Just feel free to send the message to me.
Yep, sure. Everything. It's more than enough, and I think we've had a great conversation today.
Yeah, I loved it. If you want to come back on and talk about, I don't know, whatever it is you're going through in the future, if you end up joining one of these projects, I would absolutely love to have you back on.
Yeah, sure, no problem. I'll get if I join the projects, I'll get the other developers as well if I can.
Oh, awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, that would be really cool. I've been bringing on like a couple of recently a couple of people who either maintain distros or involved in distros, and I think it's fun. I think there is a lot of people who just work in the background and don't really have much of a spotlight on the work they do that absolutely deserve a lot more attention.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd like to highlight before we end is that no matter what the parent project Arch Linux they think or whatever their philosophy is, one thing that is really really good or when I talk about Arch derivative distributions and projects is that we have a very common goal, and I think we are very united. I'm talking about projects like Arch Linux, EndeavourOS, Garuda. So all of the developers are in touch. We constantly share knowledge with each other, and we constantly have dialogue basically. So as far as the community around Arch is concerned, outside of like official Arch project, we have like a lot of friendships with other projects as well. So when I was like maintaining ALG, I was constantly in dialogue with the developers of let's say EndeavourOS or Arch Linux or Garuda Linux or Manjaro. So I think the community outside is like really really vibrant. So I'm pretty sure people would want to like come talk about the stuff we do behind the scenes that people don't know about.
Well, that's a really positive message to end it on.
Yeah.
Well, as for me, my main channel, Brody Robertson, I do Linux videos, Linux news, Linux apps, things like that. Occasionally I'll look at Arch installers as well. Yeah, go check that out. My gaming channel is Brody Robertson Plays. I stream there twice a week, upload 5 or so YouTube shorts. Alongside that, if you're listening to the audio version of this, it is available on YouTube as a video version. The video version, if you're watching the video version, the audio version is available wherever you can find podcasts out there, iTunes, whatever the other things are. You'll find it. There's an RSS feed as well if you want to use that. So, you'll find it somewhere. Do you have anything else you want to say?
No.
No? Okay. Well, we can just end it there then. I guess. See you guys later.